next up, Ravi is going to come back again. And this time, he's going to have a little chat with Beth Steinberg. Beth is the Chief People Officer at a company called Zenefits. And she has over 20 years of experience in organizational development, talent strategy. She's a coach, a life coach, and she has a track record of partnering with companies and have successful outcomes. So I want to now invite Ravi and Beth to come up.
So Beth, I think what I'd like you to start off with is introducing yourself. When I looked at your bio, your profile, there was a list of some of the top companies in Silicon Valley where you've helped them with talent, both development of their leadership, retention programs, employee engagement. So can you give us a sense? We don't have a lot of topics on HR and people and talent. So we're going to leverage you to the hilt.
Okay.
So give us a sense of first, walk us through those names.
Sure.
And what you did with each one and what the learnings were from there. Yeah?
Sure. So thank you so much for having me here. And I've been doing people and talent for over 20 years. And I've been in both a number of Fortune 500 companies as well as multiple startups. And I have focused on, in the startup world, on helping companies scale. So getting to a point where they're successful enough that they're able to have some sort of exit through acquisition or through IPO. I've worked, as you mentioned, a number of different companies. My first startup, my first couple of startups were startups that were not successful. So I was at a company called Fusion One, Caspian Networks, and although they raised a great deal of money, they were not able to be successful. But I learned a great deal from those experiences. My next startup after those was a very successful startup, Facebook. So I was the first head of people at Facebook, starting in 2006, and helped scale the company from about 100 to almost 600, and tried to help put in some infrastructure to continue to help the company scale. After Facebook, I did a number of other startups and helped also work for some venture capital firms, including Mavron, which was Howard Schultz's venture capital firm. I was the chief people officer at Sunrun, which is the largest residential solar company that went public in Silicon Valley. I was also at the head of people at Brightroll, which was acquired by Yahoo. Did a number of consulting engagements, and now I'm the chief people officer at Zenefits. So done a number of different things, and I've also worked for, as I mentioned, Fortune 500 companies. In fact, the last time I was in Bangalore, I worked for EA, Electronic Arts, the gaming company, and was here about 12 years ago for EA. So I've done a number of different things for high growth companies.
Fantastic. So that's like a roster of, massively scaled out companies, many of them. Give us some of the insights. What have you learned from, when Facebook went from 100 to 600?
Yeah.
That's probably the biggest inflection in terms of people, right? Injecting people.
Yeah, I mean, it was a lot in a short amount of time. And I've certainly learned a number of lessons through all of that scaling. And now I have a model that I use when I think about scaling a company, and it's 4 different areas that are in a diamond because they're equal, and that's culture, talent, structure, and management systems and process. And many times I think in emerging companies, and this has been my experience multiple times, that companies focus mainly on 2 things as they scale, and that's culture and talent. So focus on bringing a lot of great people in, focus on having a culture where people can do their best work, and those 2 areas are obviously critical to the success of the company, but I found through my experiences that they're not sufficient. That you also have to think about how you structure the company. And what I mean by that is how many senior leaders you have or not have, how the teams work together, where you're actually placing talent. Do you have multiple locations? Do you let people work remotely? How do you structure the organization? And then what I find to be absolutely critical, but oftentimes tended to the least, and that's systems and process. So those are things like, making sure that there are management processes, like how do people get feedback? How are goals set? How do you hold leaders accountable? And I often have found over my history that that's the area that is least tended to until there's a crisis of some kind, and then companies have to go back and fix that all. And so my advice now and what I try to practice now is actually thinking about those 4 areas equally from the beginning, and I think that can save you a lot of heartache in the end.
So when you say from the beginning, how early?
Yeah, so I think pretty early. I mean, I think, where you may not be executing on that when you're a 10 or 20 or 30 person startup, you need to keep it in mind. And I think actually it's changing a little bit where earlier stage companies are thinking more about systems to help them scale and not just people to help them scale. I think it's been a little bit of a fallacy in startups that people don't want structure. I think there's a number of examples that prove that incorrect. GitHub, for example, is a wonderfully interesting company, just acquired by Microsoft, as I'm sure you know. But in the beginning, they had 0 management structure. And they thought that that was a way to actually, give people the power to do the work that they needed to do. They found out that that actually didn't really work, and that people wanted some structure. And so what I tell people is, well, most people don't want bureaucracy. Very few people want bureaucracy. I don't know many people who want chaos. And so I think there's something, pretty lovely in between chaos and bureaucracy, and that's what companies need to strive for early on and until it's too late. And I can give multiple examples of where you found that out too late, and then you had to go back and fix it, and it really hindered the success of the company.
So a question, when I talk to founders of even pretty scaled up companies and I ask them where their time is going, right?
Yeah.
There'll be 3 buckets, I'd say, large, right? One will be customer facing. The second will be capital raising. And the third is talent hunting.
Yes.
Okay?
Yes.
So, but it's always talent hunting. They don't really break it out into necessarily talent development, because
That's
there's
right.
so much on the roller coaster.
That's right, yeah.
So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, and I think this is actually something that troubles me about the startup ecosystem. And again, I think it's changing slightly, but I do think you're absolutely right. There's been a feeling that the acquisition of talent is the most important thing. While that is obviously critically important to companies bringing in the right people, what you do with people once you get them into your company is equally, if not more, important. And so I think time has to be spent on simply just spending time with people. As the person you previously had said, he spends time with people, he goes to lunch with people. And then also helping develop people's skill sets and competencies, and putting in those mechanisms early on in the company, because smart people want to learn and grow and have challenging work. And at a certain point in your company, if you don't provide ways to do that, people are going to leave. And so they have to be thought about equally.
Got it. So let me tell you another pet peeve I hear often. You know, it's like, it's so hard to get great talent, and when you get it, it's really expensive. And even after that, they don't stay as long as I want, right?
That's all true.
So how do you combat that?
You know, obviously it's something that I deal with day to day. And you know, it is a very difficult problem. I mean, especially when you think about some of the prime eco centers for talent in the US, like Silicon Valley. Seattle's getting very competitive also. You know, it is become a little mercenary. Right. And I think that can be really frustrating. And I think, you know.
Is that the new norm?
I think it is the new norm for technical talent, unfortunately. I'm not, you know, and I would say not everybody, but I do think there are people as a strategy who are moving from company to company in order to diversify their equity holdings. And while in many ways you can't blame somebody, that makes it a very difficult challenge for companies. And, you know, I think what companies can do to combat it is, A, make sure that you're bringing on the right people focused on what is the work, what are they going to accomplish, is the work interesting, is it challenging? You know, I think smart people want to work on hard things, so making sure that is, you know, conveyed in a way that's authentic when you're hiring. And then I also think having really good leaders within your company so they can, you know, make sure people are being developed, they know when there's challenges, they can address them up front. And the other thing, you know, and I think this is probably here to stay, is having very distributed teams. So at Zenefits, for example, yeah, we have, I'm out here, we have a technical team in Bangalore, we have a technical team in Vancouver, Canada, and so we are trying to put ourselves in a position where we are not necessarily tied from a talent perspective to Silicon Valley. And you know, you see a number of companies doing that now, and I think it is a good strategy, but it also can be difficult.
So, you know, one of the founders also said, you know, when I look at employees, engineering employees especially, they look like they have a better portfolio than some of the VCs, right? They have a better portfolio than some of the VCs.
Yes, that is true.
You know, it's like, but you know, here's the thing. How do you coach leadership into engineering talent? Is it a different process than the other skill sets? And how important is that?
Yeah, well, you know, I think a couple things about technical leadership. First of all, I believe that there should be dual tracks within every company for technical talent. We shouldn't force any leader, but technical people to be people leaders because they think that's the only way to progress in their career. So I am definitely a proponent of having a track that is equal in terms of ability to, you know, have higher compensation and more, you know, influence within the organization where you don't have to be a people leader. So I think that's one step. The second thing is, you know, I find that a lot of, you know, technical leaders are extremely competent leaders. And I think, you know, just like any leader, they need to be developed. I think, you know, we assume sometimes in startups and even with founders that they know how to lead, but we don't teach them how to lead. So it's a little bit of a false premise there. And so I believe that with technical leaders and with all leaders, it is the responsibility of the company to help them learn and grow, give them feedback, and understand how they can become great leaders. I'm a huge proponent of bringing in leadership coaching, one-on-one coaching for leaders. In fact, in our Vancouver office, for our 7 or 8 technical leaders, we have coaches for all of them using technology, using, you know, FaceTime and Slack, a company called Sounding Board. They're able to get coaching in a very scalable way.
Got it. So I'm going to get to that last question later. about the future of work and management. But before that, let's just talk about the inflection when you start to scale. You've seen some of this, founders to CEOs, professional
Yes.
CEOs, and the interaction and what happens there.
Yes.
I don't think everybody in the audience is necessarily in that situation, but if they were to get to that,
Yeah.
what guidance do you have for us?
Yeah. I mean, I think it can be very difficult because obviously, as a company grows, the skills needed for across the company are change, and I think that's just a reality. And I think we have to quit pretending that that's not the case. And somebody who is a great leader at a 50-person company or a 100-person company may or may not have the skill set or the desire to be a CEO at a 500-person company. So I think from the beginning, we have to be honest and have those conversations up front. I think secondly, any leader, any CEO has to build a competent team around them. No one knows everything. If someone thinks they know everything, I think that's a very big red flag as a leader. So trying to really get a good sense of what is that CEO or founder good at, what do they have deficits in, and how can you augment those deficits to make a full team that's really able to help a company scale. So I think that's a critical step. I find when a leader hangs on to something too much, it can cause real problems.
So, for instance, Zenefits, you joined
Yes.
about a year ago.
Yes.
I doubt there was a hotter company in the Valley at
Yes.
the time. They went through a little bit of turmoil.
They did.
And we had Lax here last
Yes,
year.
yes.
He spoke here.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about that experience? You came in
Sure.
at a time of inflection for them, right?
Yeah. So Zenefits.
Tell us a little bit about Zenefits
Yeah,
too,
I will.
before and after you joined.
So Zenefits it's a SaaS company, and we do products to power how people get paid, how information is processed. We have a mobile app that's an incredible mobile app for companies on the go, and we really service small, medium businesses. When the company started 5 years ago, 6 years ago, the company did two things that I think were, a little problematic. They grew incredibly quickly. So they went from, 20 employees to almost 2,000 employees in a matter of a couple of years. And when they did that, they didn't really have any systems in process, any structure, and they didn't really have a lot of management and experienced leadership talent there. And so what happened because of that are a lot of the scandals or things that you probably heard about with the company where there were regulatory issues. But in my opinion, that was more of a symptom of overgrowth than it was of anything else. So the company retrenched a couple of times, and close to 2 years ago brought in a very experienced leader named Jay Fulcher, who is a longtime SaaS leader in Silicon Valley, and really pivoted our company into the company that we are today. When he did that, we did a lot of different things. I mean, he brought in a completely new leadership team. We tried to get a sense of what was working and what wasn't working within the company in terms of, leadership and feedback and collaboration. So we've done a lot of listening. And we've also tried to really focus on the product. I think some of you maybe heard Lisa Reeves, who spoke here yesterday. We've tried to focus on, building a great product, spending more time with customers, and really trying to move forward in a different direction. But certainly there was, a lot of damage done in the first few years without thinking through these things, even though the company grew incredibly quickly.
So a couple of last topics before
Sure.
we close here. One was about, you've achieved a reasonable gender balance at
Yes.
Zenefits. What's your perspective on Silicon Valley, the catharsis they're going through?
Yeah. Well, we are about 37% female in the company right now, and on the leadership team, we're about 25% female. We have made a very specific and concerted effort to bring more women into the company in technical roles specifically. So over the last 2 quarters, with a partnership between my team and the engineering and product team, we've been able to increase the number of women that we have in the technical roles by 125%. But that was not by accident. That was a very deliberate program and process to look at everything that we were doing to make sure that we were not alienating women who came into the process. So, making sure we had women on the interview team, making sure the questions were unbiased. We use a program called Textio that looks through text and makes sure that your job descriptions are not gender biased in any way. So we made a very big effort. There's still a lot of room to grow in Silicon Valley in terms of gender equality. There's still a pretty large lack of representation of women in the venture capital community. There's actually a group called All Raise that just started, which is a variety of different women in the VC world that are taking on this problem by mentoring women who want to be in investment in VC. Certainly there are more female CEOs than there used to be, but it's still lacking. So we still have a lot of work to do in this area. I do think there's more awareness, which is good, but we haven't solved the problem yet.
Got it. So, I think but you're optimistic, right?
I am optimistic and I am determined.
Okay, very good. So last question. You're an expert in talent, an expert in people development. Let's do a little bit of crystal ball gazing. For instance, let me give you an example. Technology is being infused in this process. So I have an interview that's done by video conference. It's literally even a bot that's interviewing me. I then get selected through an AI algorithm that top ranks me.
Yeah.
My feedback is, again, automated through a portal or a mobile app. I may even get fired through the app, right? Potentially.
I hope not, but maybe.
But, where do you see human relations? If it's called human relations, I actually see it as becoming machine relations soon, right?
Well, I think we're not there yet. I think if you look at Amazon tried to do a recruiting tool through AI and they found out that it was heavily biased to men because that's all the people they had in the system. So I don't know that we will get to a point in hiring and developing people that is devoid of humans. I do think there are multiple applications in terms of having an unbiased process, making sure questions are asked in a fair way. Most companies have technical people work on a technical problem or some other problem during the interview process. I think all of those things can be aided by the new technologies. What I am suspect of is things around, alignment to company values, alignment to company culture being added to the culture. I don't know today how you can do that without having a person-to-person conversation. Perhaps we will get there, but I'm unconvinced that portion can be taken over by machine learning or AI.
Great, that's reassuring. Thank you so much, Beth.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you for coming out to NPC.
Thank you.